Hello, I'm Casey Aiken. This is 21 This Week. Coming up next, Hogan and Alsobrooks, a neck-and-neck race for the U.S. Senate seat. Did Governor Wes Moore earn a Bronze Star, and does it matter? If your child cannot read by the third grade, should they be forced to repeat? Some parents say no. And is Trump flailing downward while Harris is flailing upward? Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by the Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher, and civic activist, Cary Lamari. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. The first Earl of Balfour, Arthur James Balfour, was quoted as saying in 1892, there are three kinds of falsehoods: lies, damn lies, and statistics. If Lord Balfour were alive today, he might add a fourth: political polling. 7 weeks before the start of early voting, a new poll released by Impact Research and Fabrizio Ward have the two candidates for the vacant Maryland U.S. Senate seat, former Governor Larry Hogan and Prince George's County Angela Alsobrooks, as tied at 46 each, while another poll released by the Gonzalez polling firm has Miss Alsobrooks leading Hogan 46-41. So which one do you believe? Mark, according to Gonzalez, Hogan is getting 21% of Democratic voters, but he needs at least 30% of Democrats to win. And there are only 6% of Democratic voters who identify as undecided. So can Hogan win this race?
Well, of course he can win this race, and I think both polls show a significant number of undecideds, and that I think actually I have a lot of confidence in Gonzalez, and Patrick has been a great pollster, and the difference may well be accounted by how much the pollster pushes on people who are undecided to declare what their intentions are. This is a very competitive race, no matter how you cut it, and every single poll has shown that.
So let me ask you a follow-up question. So the formula that Bob Ehrlich and Larry Hogan had in winning their gubernatorial elections was that they needed to carve out a certain percentage of Democratic votes out of Montgomery County in particular. Is Hogan able to do the same?
I think so. I mean, on the face of looking at how competitive the race is, I think clearly the opportunity was there. I'm mindful of 2018, his target across the board in Montgomery County was about 45%. We came to that level, although about 10 days before the election, I saw him and he said, "Are we going to carry Montgomery County?" And I had to say, no, that probably is not going to happen. So, yeah, I mean, looking at the numbers, there's no mistaking the fact that this is a very competitive race.
Okay, I got another follow-up, but I want to ask Cary next. Cary, according to the Impact Research poll, Hogan outperforms Alsobrooks with voters who consider economic concerns as the primary issue and has a higher favorability rating than his opponent because he's better known. Can Alsobrooks win?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to remember all the heavy hitters in politics are supporting Alsobrooks. You got Wes Moore, Jamie Raskins, Chris Van Hollen, the list goes on. Ike Leggett, Mark Elrich, the list goes on and on and on. Look, the lady's dynamic. She's now attached her wings to Kamala Harris. I think, I said it before. I like Governor Hogan, but I think Alsobrooks is going to carry the day.
Could I just follow up? I think Cary inadvertently just touched on the weakness that Angela is having, which is that all the reasons he attributed were Democratic endorsements. And we need to keep in mind that there's a lot of independents who in Maryland have decided to be independents precisely because they don't want to be a Democrat. And there are a lot of Democrats who are in that middle spot who don't necessarily vote in a Democratic primary. And everything he said, Cary, was all about, you're a Democrat, you ought to vote for Angela. Well, that may not resonate with a lot of other voters.
Well, you got to add to that, though. I mean, this is a Trump presidential election, and he is so divisive that he's going to create that push for Democrat supremacy in elections, in my opinion.
We got a few. It'll be fun to watch this. But before we break to another topic, I want to switch slightly to the CD6 race, where former Republican delegate Neil Parrot seems to be leading April Delaney by 2 points going into that race. How tight is this race, Cary?
It's tighter than I thought it would be, because the Delaneys, with the long history of holding public office, but I should have taken into account Western Maryland. I mean, it is a heavy a Republican stronghold, and it's coming down to Frederick County. And Frederick, I don't know.
Well, I mean, are there enough votes though in Western Maryland, Mark, to assure Parrot the victory?
Well, he needs votes outside of Western Maryland. Let's hard stop on that particular point. He's run a number of times before. Anybody who knows it, he's a great guy, an able campaigner. He's run against David Throne in prior elections, who had, as we obviously saw with the primaries for Senate, gazillion dollars to throw at races. So in many ways, he's well known in the district already, and is focused not just in Frederick, but in basically increasing the percentages with independents in the Montgomery part of the district. So yes, this is a very competitive race. And I think the fact that the polling shows it so close will indicate that a lot of resources will be thrown in the coming weeks.
I think it's a fascinating race to see how this is going to turn out. We got to go on to our next topic. And, I brought this up the last time we all met. And this is something that, kind of, I find, quite perplexing. I mean, our public school system is not doing a good job when it comes to literacy of our students. And so the State Board of Education has come out with a new plan, and most educators will tell you that being proficient in reading by third grade is essential for the development of children. In fact, the Annie B. Casey Foundation noted that students who don't read proficiently by the end of third grade are 4 times more likely to leave school without a diploma, and increases if a student comes from low-income family, Black or Latino. And this Board of Education came up with a plan that said third grade students who aren't proficient are going to be held back. Now, there are many that oppose this. Cary, is it because we're concerned about harming the kids' psyche, or do we want to educate them to become functioning adults?
We want to educate them to become functioning adults. However, we have gone through some very turbulent times in recent years. Kids took the brunt of that with the pandemic and a lot of things, the economy. Personally, I think that we need to bear that in mind, and we need to focus on the psyche of these children as well. I mean, there's nothing more harmful to a child than holding them back in school. So I'm not supportive of that. Not to mention, a lot of it is when that child turns 5 and starts kindergarten. I mean, it affects. There's so many elements that come into play. I think we should wait a few years before we try to review this kind of thing.
Well, Mark, let's switch to you. I mean, it's been 4 years since the pandemic, and if you're a third grader, you would have been in pre-K during that pandemic year. So, I mean, are we just want to gloss over the fact that our public school systems aren't doing a good job?
Absolutely, and I think the fact that the question is whether or not to hold the student back or not is the question that we're discussing, is illustrative of one of the main problems. The real question we should be asking is, what's the intervention on the part of the schools to get the kid to read? And that may or may not be holding back. Cary, all due respect, I go back having a kid in MCPS that had trouble reading and did get support, but we ended up going out of the school and getting a tutor, a commercial tutor. I won't give them that does a land office business in Bethesda with people going to those illustrative schools in MCPS, and they're the ones who basically taught him to read. And what's fascinating is those are resources that are available, but they're not available from MCPS. And MCPS had, quote, advised us against doing that. I will tell you that it ended up working. Again, we should be focusing not on holding it back, which is the convenience of the schools, but we should be focusing on what are the educational interventions that are going to make a difference to get the kid to read.
I agree with that.
All right, Cary, you got about 30 seconds to wrap it up.
Quick. I mean, electronics plays a large part of that, of the problem. I had most my kids are products of the public school system, and one has a master's degree in public health. The other was an attorney. He passed away. An attorney with a PhD in political science and a master's in business. So, our schools don't do a bad job. It is the public-private relationship that counts. Parents have a responsibility.
All right, we got to wrap this up. But I think what's illustrative of both of your stories is the fact that you had great parental involvement.
Yes.
That you took an interest in your kids, and the schools can't do it alone. It has to be from parents. When we come back from this short break, new questions about Governor Moore's military record have been raised, and which presidential candidate has Big Mo going into the election. Stay tuned.
When I first saw a turtle, my heart was full. Now anything but lonely.
We have this deep connection, this heart connection.
He just wants to be close to you and part of your life.
Every day with Turtle is a perfect day.
When I'm holding her, it makes me feel calmer.
I think everything he does shows how much he loves us.
When we adopt a shelter pet,
We discover
they're a little bit of a lot of things,
but they're all pure love.
And welcome back. Stolen valor claims have been in the news lately as questions regarding Democratic vice presidential candidate and governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, and his service are being discussed from his by the national media. Locally, now the same scrutiny is being applied to Maryland Governor Wes Moore's integrity after a 2006 application for a White House fellowship program was uncovered by the New York Times, and in which Moore claimed he had been awarded the Bronze Star Medal. Cary, while Governor Moore claimed that this regarding the Bronze Star and another false claim about receiving the Maryland College Hall of Fame award, he says they were innocent mistakes. Will this tarnish his glowing reputation as governor going forward?
This is a nothing burger. Look, with all due respect, veterans, it's incredible that we revere our veterans. There's no question about that. And you have to revere Wes Moore's service to our country. But this was just an incident that just fell through the cracks. The man, it's a nothing burger. He wished he could have corrected it earlier. What's going to count is his last 2 years in public office and whether he can increase the jobs in this state. That's what's going to make the difference, in my opinion.
Mark, for those who are skeptical, it would seem doubtful that Governor Moore would not have known that he didn't receive the Bronze Star, since military medals and ribbons are part of the identity of each soldier. And each time he put on his dress uniform and those ribbons, they would have to have been displayed. What do you think will happen to this story?
Well, I'd point out, let me push back a little bit with Cary on this. Irrespective of party, faults, these stolen valor claims come back to white politicians. I was in New York a number of decades ago when campaign against Patrick Moynihan came to a grinding halt when Tim Russert was able to unearth the fact that his opponent, Republican, was claiming to have been an officer when he actually was a civilian at the Pentagon working in the Secretary of Defense. I could go on and on and on and say that these false claims issues are a perennial issue. Among veterans, the distinction between, combat service, not combat service, what medals you got, what medals you didn't get, how you frankly got the medals as well, matters very, very deeply. And word to the wise to political staffs everywhere: go look at your boss's bio and clean it up, because if you make this mistake, people will draw the conclusion that the person making false claims is simply not trustworthy.
But you can't use that with Wes. I mean, he's literally been above board, been trustworthy.
It's not a question of, quote, using it. I'm saying that the public, the irrespective of party, and this, we've seen this happen in multiple campaigns. It really hurts. It makes a difference, and you put a partisan filter on it and say, well, in this case, other things matter. This is a mistake that, frankly, people should not be making on their bios. They should be very, very careful about.
I agree.
Well, there was an interesting editorial in the Baltimore Sun that said just as much as the summation that the two of you had. So we'll see whether Governor Moore will be hurt by this going forward in the future. He seems to have a very bright political career. All right, changing topics, and this is the topic du jour. According to the mainstream media, former President Donald Trump and current Republican nominee for the White House is so flummoxed by his Democratic opponent, Vice President Kamala Harris, that he is flailing desperately like a punch-drunk boxer to land a punch. And if you listen to Republican pundits, however, the bump from the Democratic convention for Vice President Harris has already run off. I want to remind both of you, when you were the panelists on the last time we did the show 5 weeks ago, we were still talking about whether Joe Biden was going to be the nominee. I mean, so much has changed so quickly and rapidly that I guess all of our heads are spinning. Cary, the question remains and being raised about the lack of policy statements from the Harris-Walz campaign and her deliberate avoidance of the media. Has she peaked too soon?
No, she hasn't even peaked yet, as far as I'm concerned. In fact, I said at that last show that Trump's character, he will present it, and he's done that. Trump's biggest problem is himself, his sense of superiority, his bias against women. His attacks on. Well,
let's focus on your candidates, Cary. I mean, she doesn't have any policy statements on her website. She barely did an interview with CNN. Is she going to fade as people give her greater scrutiny?
She's challenged with a lot of dynamics at the moment. I think the war in the Middle East is a large part of that. Look, the big three that she has to deal with is the war, women's rights, and the economy. And she definitely needs to present her platform before the election. But other than that, she sits back and she watches Trump self-implode, and she's doing good. I mean, that's
right. Let's see what Mark has to say about this. Because, Mark, it was safe to assume that before President Biden dropped out, Mr. Trump thought he had the election in the bag.
Well, I would.
And now he finds his message is not resonating quite so well. Can he get his mojo back?
Yeah, here's the thing. It was very competitive back then, and I think we talked about it at that time, and it is very competitive right now. This is, of course, an electoral college election, and racking up more votes than California only does so much for you. It remains competitive, and if you go back to where we were at that in June, it was still very, very close and what have you. More than the horse race. I think the interesting polling data is in the sort of changes that are taking place between 2020 and this year. And to Cary's pleasure, we are seeing on one hand college-educated women in basically red areas shifting, who were once Republicans, shifting towards Harris. On the other hand, we're seeing non-college men in across the country, particularly Hispanic, but also some African American men who are voting less Democratic than they were in the past. And how that change works out will be very interesting. And it is also likely to have a huge impact on the Electoral College. I would just, if I have a moment, I would take the sort of cartoon characters that basically the video media tends to focus on and put that aside and really focus on the issues that people really care about.
Well, we have a debate coming up in about 5 days, and it'll be the first debate between the two candidates. It's the only scheduled debate between the candidates. There may be more, there may be less. I mean, there may be, there won't be less. There may be more given the outcome, but a number of pollsters have said that the election is going to be won or lost in this debate. Do you agree, Cary?
You know what? All Kamala has to do is show up. I mean, as soon as he starts attacking her because she's a woman, an African American, and from Indian descent, I mean, Trump is going to go crazy. And if Kamala just keeps her cool and stays on the issues, she's got it. She's got him licked, in my opinion.
And so Mark, the former president exhibited great discipline in his earlier debate with President Biden. And so if he doesn't self-immolate, as Cary is hoping, will he come out on top?
Well, yes. I think in that the debates obviously provide an opportunity to focus on the issues that people really care about. All the data I see, that people are very concerned about the economy, and that has been true for months and months, and true in poll after poll after poll. Trump has a record on the economy. Harris, she's got to decide whether she's for Bidenomics or not, or how she's different from Bidenomics, and what changes she would make. And when the issues are focused, I mean, I hear Cary. Cary's very characteristic of a lot of Democrats who want to run against a cartoon character. And MSNBC and others have done a great job of making Trump into this figure, and ignoring that the race is going to be settled by people who are largely in the middle, who care about very specific issues.
That's just unfair. I mean, the reality is, it's not that Democrats want to run on character. It's that Trump doesn't let it go. It's all on him. He does it to himself. I'm sorry.
Well, Cary and Mark, we're going to have to wait until after Tuesday's debate to see whether or not either which one of you has got the right insight on this. I want you to stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from this short break.
Hey world, I have a quick message. It's about safe driving. All right, let's go. Anytime you're driving, have the seatbelt buckled tight. Both hands on the wheel and your phone out of sight. When not in your hand trying to text somebody back. Because if you do, your car might get smacked. The moral of the story, just put your phone down. The people on the road will stay safe and sound. Put your phone down, put your phone down. People on the road will stay safe and sound. Yeah.
Jordan knows he shouldn't eat this entire bowl of nachos, but tonight he's earned that right. Because a few hours ago, in the middle of happy hour, he recognized a sign. Not from the gods or a bolt of lightning, but from a double heart, a kissy face, and a fourth ha in ha ha ha. That's when Jordan knew he was buzzed. So when it was time to go, he got a ride home instead of driving. Be a legend like Jordan. Recognize your buzzed warning signs and get a ride home. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
And welcome back. Now with parting shots, Cary Lamari.
Listen, I knew I said I wasn't going to talk about attainable housing, but I'm sorry. What we needed to talk about is a recent study from Redfin this month articulated, or had a graph on it that articulated that 26% of the most affordable housing in the country were sold to investors, to equity development corporations and private investors. What that is doing is creating this competition and driving up the cost of housing. This entire paradigm of attainable housing is to create these multiplex housing units in our residential neighborhoods. The problem with that is the consequences are devastating, to first-time home buyers because it drives up the cost of the housing, of the land, and makes it more difficult for our young people. And we don't want to turn Montgomery County into a corporate rental community, and that's what attainable housing will do. Now, recently, I watched Mark Elridge give an absolutely wonderful presentation on the Attainable Housing Initiative and all of the potential consequences that will occur as a result of it. I want to point out to the public that you need to focus on these new considerations for attainable housing and these future meetings that the council will be having with the public. They're going to be having 6 of them. And one other thing, we have the housing and infrastructure policy in the county council next week. Get informed, participate.
Thank you, Cary. Good topic. Mark Uncapher, your parting shot.
Well, I wanted to acknowledge that Rachel Munoz has resigned from the House of Delegates. She's not a Montgomery County resident, but she's been very accessible to Montgomery. She's in Anne Arundel County. This is the middle of the term, and we have quite a few delegates who are resigning, being replaced by their Central Committee members. I wanted to recognize just how difficult sometimes being a delegate is, having a job and a family, and the time constraints on that, and thank Rachel and the others who've had to resign for their service.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Cary. I want to thank you both for being on the show. It's always fun to come back, and it's always fun to talk politics. I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest-hitting political talk show, 21 this week. I'm Casey Aiken.